All right, what's up, everybody? This is going to be the week 1 of the JY Dojo 2-month program, but from the Protoss angle. If you want to hear some details about generally what the series is and how I'm conducting it, go to the Zerg one. I explained it in the first couple of minutes. But basically, I'm going to be training both sides from Zerg against Protoss. And even if you're a Zerg player, I encourage you to watch the Protoss side because these two builds will be working in parallel against each other. And you also want to know exactly what you should be your opponent's doing so that you can counter it. Alright, with that said, let's just dive right into the game. This is going to be Polypoid. This is a single player game. Again, week 1, I'm just going to focus on the first 7 minutes and 30 seconds of the game so we can focus and do a deep dive on all of the nuances, things that you should just watch out for, and things that you should just record in your head on single player and in live games, right? So this is really meant to teach you how to analyze your games, what to look out for in replays, and just focus less about the fact that you won or you lost, but just focus on your execution, okay? So in this game, I'm going to be going for a Forge Fast Expand. It's a very structured build. Gateway Expand is excellent. It's probably more meta, but at the same time, it's a little bit more nuanced. And we'll go over that in the second month on the execution part. But for this, we'll just start doing a Forge Fast Expand. I believe in this game, my scouting pattern's a little bit funny. I usually like to maybe pylon scout up at 9 because you know that the overlords like to scout towards your natural so that you can see it. I think in this build I kind of opted to just do something a little bit different. There's a lot of variations with the Forge Fast Expand, right? You can pylon scout, you can not pylon scout, you can go for an 11 Forge to be safe, you can do a 12 Forge and then 13 Nexus, 13 Cannon, which is a little bit risky against a 9 pooler. But in this game, I'm just going to be a little bit more safe. I'm going to get that Forge right at 11, and I'm going to go ahead and scout, okay? As you do this, generally, if you want to gamble, you can get the Nexus before the Cannon right at 13. I don't recommend it if you don't know what they're doing because you just insta-die to a 9 pull. And yeah, you should probably be scouting a little bit earlier. However, if you want to be safe, you can just make the Cannon first, or the Nexus, right? Either way, it doesn't make a huge difference. I think here I'm just going to be greedy and I'm going to play Nexus first right at 13, hold it, and don't make another probe. Get that Cannon immediately because you still want to block a potential overpull, okay? So getting the Cannon right at 150 should block the overpull like the first 2 lanes, but sometimes on close maps you need to bring a probe and block the ramp so that they don't get in, okay? At this point, let's assume our opponent is a Zerg player. Let's say they're at the bottom right and that they're opening overpull and that they intend to open a 5-hatch layer build, as I said in the instruction video for Zergs, okay? This case, you still pump probes non-stop. I like to get my gateway right at about 15. Most builds, I actually like to make the pylon before the gas so that I can continue my probe production. Oh, but I guess I make the gas first. Okay, so I'm wrong about myself. Okay, so this is actually okay. Let me explain it. If you made the Nexus before the Cannon, this can be okay. Because your Nexus is going to free up your supply. You'll be blocked for about a few seconds. But if you want it to be a little bit more mineral optimal, then you can definitely make that, okay? So let me just pause right here. You just keep making probes. I transferred about 5 probes. You have a probe that's inside their main base scouting. Don't leave their base unless you are desperate and it's gonna die, because you wanna see if this is gonna be a 3-hatch Hydra build, or if it's going to be a layer tech, okay? So once you have this saturation going, notice that the saturation of your probes is very important. So I try to transfer 5 or 5 or 6, and then you immediately get saturation at your natural once this first one pops out. You want to start mining your gas immediately. Usually my gas finishes around the same time my gateway finishes, and a lot of times you should make sure that you get that cyber core as fast as you can, okay? So I make the cyber core, I make a zealot, and start mining that gas, and make sure you make non-stop probes the entire game. We'll be setting up for a 1-1 push, which is 5 Corsairs with +1 and about 8 Zealots with +1 as well. Okay? Make sure you're just making these things non-stop, and with this build, I like to make Zealots non-stop from this one gateway. There are other builds where you don't necessarily do that, but that's okay. Alright? Make sure you don't get pylon blocked. I like to make my gas with this build at around 4 minutes-ish, right? That's around like that 24, 25, 26 supply. The second your Stargate, your Cybercore finishes, you want to get that Stargate, okay? So, what are we looking for here? Like, let's just pause and just kind of like think through the game and set up the build, right? We're going to be setting up for a push, right? But at the same time, any real build, you don't cut probes, okay? Unless you're doing an all-in, type build. But even if you're doing an all-in build, you never cut probes early or else something's wrong with your build, right? You notice that I'm just making probes non-stop, 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 and hopefully as a Protoss player you can scout with your probe, and if you're a little bit lower level and you can't handle like your probe always staying alive against like 4 or 6 slings, it's okay to run it outside, just don't go back home, okay? The reason why is because you could still just run all the way around over and over and over just to scout whether there's Hydras in play or not, okay? And eventually you should be able to see whether that's happening. Another thing that you want to scout is whether or not their Ling speed finishes right at about 5 minutes, because if they don't have Ling speed, that's not a surefire tell that they're going Hydras, but it probably gives you 70% odds that they're going Hydras, because you can't get Ling speed with 973. So it's important to keep that probe alive, and if you don't have it alive, you have to send out another one. Don't be greedy, okay? Don't ever be greedy. Again, if you don't have the APM to keep the probe alive in their base while doing everything with your build, send the probe all the way over here, and then just send it back right at around 4 minutes. And even if you don't get in the base, just send it all the way back, like 1 click, and then back, right? Make sure you're just checking what's going on at 5 minutes. Make sure you see on their half of the map if they have Ling speed or not, and if you can try to tell how many drones they might have, okay? Those are the key things. So let's keep going on with this build, and notice that I'm doing my best job to keep the probe production non-stop. Once you start that Stargate, you're gonna try to make your upgrades, okay? So instead of getting a Citadel right now, right, if I have 100 gas, if I like hold a Zealot, I can make a Citadel immediately, and that's more for a Templar open, okay? But if you're going for the 1-1 build with Zealots, you need to make the upgrades, and if you make the 2 upgrades, then you can't go a Citadel, okay? So that's kind of something for you Zerg players that are watching this too, right? A Protoss does not have gas for Stargate, +1, +1, and a Citadel. Okay, it's like those are 4 different things. You can only have 3. You can only have 3 of them, okay? And if they're going for a Templar, that means they don't have one or two of the upgrades, and you can also see at the front of it that whether or not they'll be upgrading this or not, okay? So obviously, if you remember in the Zerg video, if the forge is spinning right at around 430, that means I don't have the gas to make a Citadel, right? Or that means I don't have the gas to make a Stargate, right? So you see by this deduction that we could infer what the Protoss build is, right? By learning what their gas limitations are. And also as a Protoss player, you want to make sure that you're allocating your gas appropriately for the build, right? Whether you're going for the Zealots, whether you're going for upgrades, or whether you're going for Templars. Very important to know those little differences. And if you ever want to play around with some crazy builds in the future, you can always play around with getting a faster gas. I can teach some of that in some future videos. But all right, let's go on with the build. You see I'm making non-stop Zealots, non-stop probes. I got a little bit blocked, right? So, you know, even I'm not perfect with these builds. But as long as you don't get blocked for too long, that's okay. I've got my +1 upgrades spinning on both sides. I usually like to get the air just so I can bust down the Scourge first, but you can also get the weapons if you want to bust down the Lings first. It doesn't really matter. Once this is up, your Corsair must go immediately. okay? And you're still making non-stop probes at least until 7 minutes. And when you have the money, you should go ahead and make a Citadel, okay? The Citadel comes after the Stargates whenever you have the money as you're making non-stop probes. Don't rush the Citadel at the expense of your probes. One cute thing that I'm doing here is I try to hide some of my Zealots sometimes. It's not the biggest thing, but one of the things that you could do. You make sure that you're not being supply blocked anywhere by constantly making probes. And you notice that with this build, I don't believe that I'm actually getting a second gateway, okay? And this might be a little bit counter, okay? This might be a little bit different to what you might be used to. And the reason for that is that if you make Zealots non-stop from your gateway, you should have about 8 right at about 7:30. But if you're going for a build that doesn't go non-stop Zealots like this, then you need to compensate with a second gateway, and you might see some pros playing. There's different variations. Some of them go for the second gateway like at the natural, and then you just kind of get to 8 or 9 sooner. But this build, I'll just be going off of one Zealot, one gateway, and then just making non-stop probes. And the first Corsair always needs to go to the opponent's base. So if you saw in the Zerg video, you can't kill the Overlord first. Don't do that. Unless you're like doing a clowny build or you just want to gamble. It's a bad habit. Don't do that, okay? Unless you really know what you're doing. Unless you got a scout off and you can confirm, okay? Let's presume that the Zerg is here. The number one thing that you want to look for is the existence of a gas at 545. Because on Polypoid, there's a mineral-only third base, they cannot have a gas at their third base, right? Therefore, if there is no gas upon scouting, right, they are most likely going to be going for a 5-hatch Hydra build, okay? Assuming they have a layer, right? Assuming they didn't, open anything crazy, okay? That's what you can deduce. Now, they can still open mutas. They can open 5 mutas with 1 gas. Okay, so you got to be careful about that. Okay, so let's say you're scouting, you see a lair, you see a hatchery, you see a hatchery, you see them having like their 5 hatcheries. And again, have this video open parallel with my Zerg video. Okay, just have it open and just compare the times of what you're scouting and just log it in your head. Okay, because what you need to do is you need to understand the build from both perspectives. Okay. If they have a Hydra Den and they don't yet have a second gas, that means they're going 5-hatch Hydra. They cannot be going mutas because they cannot afford it, because they spent that gas on the Hydra Den, right? And especially if they have the Evo chamber, they're also spending additional money on that. If they're going to go for that 5 muta play without the second gas, then they need to hold their money with their 5 hatcheries, and you should be able to see that. Once you see that they're opening 5 mutas, you don't need to overreact here, okay? You can just make a cannon here. You definitely want to make a cannon at your natural, because a lot of times with 5 mutas, they one-shot probes, and they'll try to pick stuff off at your natural, okay? But if they're going 5 mutas, and they're going for your main base, and you're making non-stop Corsairs with cannons right here, you don't need to build extra cannons. You don't. So those are the small nuances that you should definitely watch out for. See that my upgrades are on the way, my Corsair is running back home. If I can kill the Overlord, I can. I go for it. Usually I like to get the cannon during the production of my second Corsair. It looks like here I'm getting a little bit later, not the end of the world. There is a universe where they camp and, snipe off some stuff, but it's usually not that big of a deal. Obviously, versus a Muta Open, you want to make sure that you have that a little bit sooner. Now, here's the key point for Protoss, okay? The key point for Protoss is, again, you're making your probes nonstop, you're making your Zealots nonstop, right? I have 6 Zealots after this one pops out, and my +1 is almost done. 3 Corsairs, 2 more on the way. Here's the most important thing for a Protoss in the first 7.5 minutes. If you're going for this build, you must make a Templar Archives at 6:30. Alright, I'm 6 seconds late. But you must build that at 6:30, okay? You could be a couple seconds late, but I would not recommend being a couple seconds late like I was, okay? And again, there's always practice to this, right? Like, I'm some instructor here, but I'm making some mistakes myself, right? And with my second, my Templar Archives, I like to get a second gateway immediately. And right at about 7:30, let's try to see what we're going for, okay? What do we have at 730? What's the goal for you as a student who's trying this build on single player or on practice games, right? What's the Mario Kart Ghost benchmark that you're fighting against, okay? So let's just see right in about 10 seconds, okay? Notice here I make a preemptive cannon. I've got my units running out because you do want a second cannon because you don't want Lings or Hydras running against you. But let's just pause it, right? I've made 8 Zealots off of 1 gateway, right? And that seems kind of surprising to certain people, right? They might be like, whoa, I thought you needed 2 gateways. But no, that's the power of non-stop production from 1 gateway, right? I've got 5 Corsairs. Both of my upgrades are complete. 44 probes right at 730, okay? There are some builds that cut right at 41 probes, which means that you cut probes right at around 640-ish. But if you're making non-stop probes, non-stop Zealots, non-stop Corsairs, 630, Templar Archives, and these 2 cannons, you're doing really well. Okay, you have all the tools that you need to do the damage that you can possibly do. Like, you have everything that Bisu also has at this time, okay? It's just now what do you do with it? And what to do with it, that's going to be for next week. But hope everyone enjoyed this video. Again, make sure you practice these builds, constantly focus on these things, and we'll focus on the next phase of the game in the next lesson. So hope you guys enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next one. See ya.